Rabbi.
Good Tvach, Shavua Tov. We are learning Mishnah Yismaid Katan, Perek Aleph, Chapter 1, Mishnah Dala, Mishnah 4. Now, this Mishnah is also going to discuss, again, even a halacha or a deed, when it comes to, even though we say that you can do malacha, you can do what's typically forbidden to do on Yontif, you can do on Chalamoid to prevent loss, nonetheless, this Mishnah is going to qualify that there's certain cases where we have to do it differently than usual. So the Mishnah reads, Tzadin es ha-eishus ves ha-achbarim mistei ha-ilim mistei ha-lavan kedarkai b'mayed ubashviyas. We may trap moles and mice in an orchard or a grain field. Mistei ha-ilan means a field of a tree. That means an orchard. Mistei ha-lavan from a field of the white means from the field of grain. You can trap them in your regular way, in the normal way, in the regular way, both on Chalamoid, both during Shemitah. Now, trapping animals is forbidden to do on Shabbos and Yontif, and therefore it should be forbidden to do on Chalamoid. However, if you're doing it for the purpose of preventing loss, hold on a second. I'm sorry. Today's learning has been sponsored by Barry Steinberg in memory of Sarah Devara Bas Dov, the Neshama Shavan Aliyah.
Amen. Amen.
Okay. So trapping is forbidden to do on Shabbos and Yontif. On Cholamoid, you may do it because of the fact that you're preventing loss. And in both these cases, you are going to be preventing loss because the animals damage the trees, the grain, and therefore we say that you could trap it. You could trap it kedarka. Kedarka means in its regular way. What's the regular way of trapping these animals? You dig a hole in the ground, you put a net in them, and that's how you trap the animals. That's the regular way of doing it. You could do it both during Shemitah, during Chalamoid, and during Shemitah. Now, Shemitah, we bring in Shemitah a lot here, but the parameters of Shemitah and Chalamoid are very different. You know, why can't you trap animals on Shemitah? What kind of issue is there? But the issue is the digging. Because of the fact you're digging the ground, it may look like you're trying to work the ground. And therefore, it would have been possible to have said during Shemitah, you can't do that. And nonetheless, we say that in these cases where you're trying to protect the field, there's no rabbinic restriction on Shemitah to go digging those holes in order to place in the nets and to trap the animals. So according to the first opinion, whether we're dealing with an orchard or dealing with a field of grain, you can regularly set those traps. The Chachamim say, Mistei halavan kedarkai. If we're talking about an orchard, you can do it regularly. Mistei halavan shaloi kedarkai. If we're talking about a grain field, then it has to be done in the unusual way. When you're dealing with the difference between an orchard and a grain field is that these animals that get into an orchard cause great damage. They cause a lot of damage. They eat into the roots and they kill the trees. And therefore, that is that we're dealing here with a significant loss, with a large loss. And when we're dealing with a large loss, the sages say that you can do regularly. But the loss that is incurred by the crops that they eat is not a large loss. Although it's a loss, it's not a large loss. And since it's not a large loss, therefore the halacha is, according to the Chachamim, you have to set those traps in an irregular manner. What does irregular mean? So the explanation to that is instead of taking a spade and digging up the ground, you take a pole, you stick it into the ground, you move it back and forth in all different directions, you loosen up the ground, you pull out the stick, and there you got a hole. Not the most convenient way of doing it, but it gets the job done. It's clearly not the regular way of doing it. And then you put in the trap, and then you put in the net, and that is how you can go ahead and deal with the rodents in the grain field on Chalamoid. Regarding Shemitah, the Chachamim agree with the Tanna Kama. Regarding Shemitah, you could do it regular. You don't have to do it unusual in the case for Shemitah, but for Chalamoid, you do. Again, because Chalamoid, in the Chalamoid, we're dealing with we're dealing with the malacha, or dealing with the issues of malacha, while by Shemitah we're dealing primarily with a rabbinic restriction that it shouldn't look like you're digging the field for the purposes of working the land. For that, we say already that to prevent even a small loss, you can go in and do it regularly. Next case, umekarin es hapirtza b'mayed ubeshviyas b'ina kedarkai. On Chalamoid, you can close the gap of a fence. Here we're talking about, a pirtza means a break. It's a break in a fence. A fence around what? Around a garden. That's what it's around. We're not talking about a field now. We're talking about a garden. Because we say like this, you can close the gap of the garden on Chol Hamoed. So you got this little wall that you built around the garden, and there's a break in it. You want to fix it. So typically, what do? You take rocks and you cement it together, and you get yourself a solid wall. What we're saying here is on Chol Hamoed, if you're trying to fix that break in the garden wall, there we say you can close the gap. You can close the gap, but you can't cement it, because of the fact that even if thieves or animals enter the garden, the loss would only be small. Therefore, it's forbidden to close the hole by cementing the stones together, because that's the usual way of building, which is not permitted to prevent just a small loss. Again, if you're building up a wall, that's baina, that's building, it's a malacha. It's something you'd be forbidden to do on Shabbos and Yontif. Why are we permitting you to do it on Chol Hamoed? Because it's preventing a loss. If it's a small loss, then we say that it's going to go that you have to do it in an unusual manner. Usual manner means you'll fill up the gap. It'll be a bit of a deterrent, but you can't do it in the regular way. Interestingly, they bring here on the bottom that if we're talking about a gap in a wall that surrounds a courtyard, and in a courtyard there's a lot more things for thieves and animals to get to, there the halacha would be that you'd be allowed to go ahead and close the gap in a regular way, in a professional way, by by cementing the stones together. Okay? Because there we're dealing with a much greater potential for loss, and therefore for a large loss, then the halacha is you could do it regularly. Okay. Which would, it almost seems like the difference between regular and irregular is, well, I shouldn't say that. Okay. Now, but that's the point. The point is you could do it regularly if it would be a courtyard. But the Mishna is talking about around a garden. And around a garden, we say you can fill the gap, but you can't cement it. Now, then the Mishna concludes, Ubeshavias baina kedarkai. In Shemitah, you can build a new wall around the garden in the usual manner. By Shemitah, meaning by Shemitah, again, if according to the Chachamim, we're not concerned about big loss, large loss when it comes to Shemitah. And by Shemitah, you can go ahead and you can build the wall regularly. Now, you may wonder, why am I building a wall regularly around a garden on Shemitah? Am I not supposed to allow anyone who wants to come into the field to take my things? Right? The Torah says you're supposed to leave your ground. Then not only don't work it, whatever grows, you got to leave it for animals and for anybody to come in and take. There's a lot to discuss about that halacha, but that's let's call that the essential halacha. Okay. Basically, if you can allow some, if you're okay, if I remember correctly, if let's say allowing the animals and the people to come in won't cause any damage, they're going to take fruit because look, everything in Shemitah is hefker, it's ownerless, but they're not going to ruin anything. They're just going to take the stuff, so you got to let them in. So the question would be here, why am I building this wall around my garden on Shemitah? Am I not supposed to allow people to get in? The answer is, don't close the gate. Mm-hmm. Build a wall, make sure there's a way for people to get in, and you're good to go. Mm-hmm. So therefore, the Mishnah says that when it comes to Shemitah, you could actually go in and build the wall regularly. Again, you're doing it to try to keep out. You're trying to keep, apparently you're probably doing it to keep out to some degree, certain things, and that's okay as long as there's a possibility to get in. You can build that wall, and you can build it regularly because since the only problem is, and again during Shemitah, seemingly, again the building a wall shouldn't have any kind of rabbinic problem to it on Shemitah. And therefore, we say by Shemitah, as we've been discussing Chol Hamoed and Shemitah the whole time in the Mishnah, we say by Shemitah, when we say by Chol Hamoed, you can only fill in the gap in the wall. By Shemitah, we say you can go ahead and build the wall regularly. Have a wonderful day. A good tvach, Shavua Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi. Bye-bye. Now, with regard to Shemitah,